Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining today. We're here to talk with Dr. Paolo Palmieri and Hamza Aguelal about three closely connected pieces of work we developed in the context of the Security project. The first one is called De-anonymization of health data, a survey of practical attacks, vulnerabilities, and challenges. The second one is called ECG de-anonymization, real-world risks and a privacy by design mitigation strategy. And we also have the upcoming publication, Health DP, a framework for health data de-anonymization risk assessment and mitigation with differential privacy. They all look at the anonymization of health data, first from a broad systematic perspective, and then through a focused case study on ECG data. So I want to welcome you once again for being here. And let's start with the questions. So your research shows that the anonymization of health data is not a rare or hypothetical issue, but something that has been demonstrated repeatedly in practice. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding about anonymized health data today?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk a bit about our research. I think the biggest misconception is that anonymized means safe. While in reality, many datasets retain subtle patterns which can be used to uniquely identify people or re-identify people. And there are several modern techniques, including machine learning methods, which are exceptionally good at exploiting those traces.
In the survey, you deliberately focus on practical, empirically validated attacks rather than theoretical ones. Why is this distinction so important when we talk about privacy risks in real healthcare settings?
I could actually answer that question. In healthcare, decisions are rarely made based on worst-case theory alone. That's why we actually focus on attacks, practical attacks that have actually studied in our papers. We've mentioned the implemented, and we also validated in our second paper, a practical attack, to show the actual risk and that data controllers and researchers are exposed to, like today, with developments in data science and techniques. So it's not just abstract adversaries in idealized settings, but actual implemented and practical attacks, not just mathematically possible in ideal conditions. In our survey also, we deliberately excluded the theoretical constructions and looked at the attacks that were actually reproduced across datasets.
ECG data, which stands for electrocardiogram data, comes up in your survey as one of the data types with persistent vulnerabilities. What makes ECG data particularly problematic from a privacy perspective compared to more traditional health records?
Yes, that's an interesting question. Actually, ECGs are biometrically or biometric by nature. And what makes them particularly problematic is the linkability or the hidden patterns or information in the signals themselves. In our ECG paper, the attack paper, we show that stable morphological and temporal features such as QRS complexes and statistical informations that are hidden in the data across the recording sessions, even weeks or months, can actually be exploited to exactly link or match the patients. These properties by building like individual fingerprints that remains consistent across the timing and across data sets for the same person. So what's important to note is it's not just a theoretical concern, but it's a realistic linkage that could happen. And that's what we proved in our study with and we achieved a high re-identification accuracy across 3 real-world ECG datasets. It shows that unlike the traditional records, actually ECG identify and have embedded information could actually identify patients.
In the ECG paper, you demonstrate very high re-identification accuracy, even under realistic adversarial assumptions. When you saw those results, what concerned you the most as researchers?
Well, I suppose what worried us the most was how little information an attacker actually needed. I mean, even if you consider conservative, realistic assumptions, the models could reliably link ECGs back to specific individuals, which really shows that the privacy risk isn't theoretical. It's actually baked into the data itself.
A recurring tension in all three papers is the trade-off between data utility and privacy. Based on your findings, where do you think current anonymization practices are getting that balance wrong?
Yeah, I mean, right now the balance often leans too heavily towards preserving utility without rigorously measuring privacy leakage. Utility is obviously important. That is what defines the particular task for which the data is used, such as diagnosis. However, many techniques still assume that removing only obvious identifiers, names, patient numbers, health record numbers, national identifying codes, is enough. But our results show that high-dimensional biomedical signals, such as ECGs, as Hamza was saying, still carry strong identity fingerprints.
Many studies stop after showing that an attack is possible. You go a step further and propose a privacy by design risk-based mitigation framework. What does risk-based mean in practical terms for someone handling health data, for example, a hospital, a researcher, or a data provider?
In simple words, risk-based means to adapt to our context. So risk-based means adapting the protection that we need to implement to a use case or maybe to a scenario. In simple words. So for a hospital or researcher, it means asking a few questions, the main questions: what data are we sharing, with whom, for what purpose? So taking and put in a context and to actually assess the risk based on that context or scenario, rather than just applying one fixed anonymization technique on recipe. We pushed actually the early works. In the third work, we're going to present the HealthDP, which is a proposition for an end-to-end risk-based framework that we called HealthDP to assess the risk of de-anonymization and mitigate and apply privacy enhancement technologies.
Looking ahead, if you could change one thing in how health data is anonymized, assessed, or shared in research projects, what would you prioritize?
I will prioritize mandatory quantitative privacy risk evaluations before the data is released. The tool that we developed as part of Secured can certainly play a role in that. If every dataset had to pass a stress test against realistic adversarial models, then we will have a much clearer sense of what can be shared safely and what truly needs stronger protection, such as, for example, homomorphic encryption rather than de-anonymization.
You mentioned the service we developed for the Secure project, the de-anonymization risk assessment service that is on the Secure Dino Hub that will be published in a few months. It will be public in a few months from now. How does this service turns the insights from your research into something usable in practice, and what gap does it address that existing approaches don't? Hamza. Paolo already
Yes.
half answered this, but what do you want to add on that?
Yeah, exactly. What I could add is actually we took our studies from our papers and turned them into a practical, easy, let's say, useful tool for non-technical people, and we try to turn the research into practice, and for the stakeholders for example, doctors, researchers with less technical background on anonymity and de-anonymization, and to provide an overview and practicality of amplifying the de-anonymization attacks, and provide them with an assessment on the data sets. They can use it as a pre-assessment or also after applying anonymization, rather than just assuming privacy is achieved and based on anonymization, and designed to be used by hospitals, data custodians, researchers, so it can be identified and also provide mitigation strategies that could be implemented.
So how early do you believe in the data lifecycle should it be used?
Well, this is a tool that can be used iteratively. It can be used at the very start, just to get an idea before you even plan to release the data on what the risks could be if you decided to release data, and what particular techniques could be used to enhance the privacy of the data. Once the decision has been made to release certain data, for example, to share it with other healthcare providers or with the research community, to further research in the medical domain, then the risk assessment service can be used again to evaluate the specific data that has been selected and the particular type and, for example, precision of the data. And finally, after a final data set has been approved for release, and it has been released, the tool could be used again later in time to assess any further risk that may present themselves in the future. Because, as we all know, the cybersecurity in general, threats on anonymization more particularly, are always an evolving threat. So in the future, it's certainly possible that new techniques may be developed that will further increase the risk for the anonymization.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Hamza, if I'm not mistaken, you have also received an award about the ECG paper. Do you want to tell us a few things about the award?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So the award, first of all, is very encouraging because it recognizes our work. That's the first thing. But from a researcher perspective, actually, the award acknowledges the importance of moving privacy research closer to real world and also combine healthcare practices. So it signals that the community values the work that is technical and, let's say, reflects the growing recognition of demonstrating re-identification risk and the realistic assumptions, which is the case for our work. And it was a very actually recognition, a high recognition for our work, and so we're happy about it. So yeah, I think that's all for that, and thank you very much.
Well, this has been really helpful. Thank you both very much for walking us through both the risks and the tools that can help address the privacy issues in health data anonymization, and for connecting the research directly to practical outcomes within the security project. Thank you very much.